This is the Tech Link Weekly Podcast, episode number 6, recorded Saturday, March 8th, 2014. This episode is sponsored by Audible. Go to audibletrial.com/logic to get a free audiobook of your choice. Hey guys, welcome back to the Tech Link Weekly Podcast. This is your weekly dose of the tech news from the week. My name is Creighton Miller, and this is episode, I believe, number 6 of the Tech Link Weekly Podcast. We've been doing this for 6 weeks in a row. It's been feeling good. We've been getting great results from the podcast as well, so we're going to continue it on. We're also going to start actively looking for guests as well to join us so we can get some more input on the subjects that I bring up in our podcast. Now, a little bit of scheduling information for you guys before we get started with the Tech Link Weekly Podcast. Next week, I believe it is the 18th, I want to say, 17th, 18th. This next podcast, we will not have a podcast for this next week. I will be traveling during that time and will not be back. Likewise, we will probably have a podcast come out the week after, though, but it might come out on either Monday or Tuesday because that will be also a big travel day for me. So we'll try to maybe make it a 2 weeks worth episode while still keeping it in the same half an hour to 40-minute content wise. So without further ado, though, let's head into everything we want to talk about this week. And it's kind of a great segue because I'm going to be traveling. Plus, we have a travel story from the next web. Airport security staff are going to hate wearable cameras thanks to idiots like me. Well, not idiots like me, but idiots like the guy in this article, talking about how he wore a wearable camera through airport security. And he had a very unique take from the TSA officers who decided to stop him, ask him what was happening, why he had it on, and it generally exposed a lot of the problems with the Transportation Security Administration, or best known as the guys who like to grope people on a daily basis because they feel like they want to, and they think everybody and their mother is a terrorist. But that is a different subject for a different time. But basically, this guy talks about that this little clip-on wearable camera is basically the epitome of airport security because it's so small and people can record anything and everything. Now, there are two sides to this story, and two different arguments for this story. One's for, one's against wearable cameras. The first thing is, well, we have a right to record in public. We have a right to record public officers doing their duties in a lot of states, and even, I believe, in much higher up, that is a law, a very viable law, and I believe that, it should be something that we should be able to do freely, is be able to record our public officers, not just police officers, but public workers, and not get any backlash from it. This includes, I think, the Transportation Security Administration as well. A lot of the problems that we find with many organizations, many authoritative organizations, kind of stems from having a camera there showing the evidence that there is an issue there. And people who deny the issue in light of the clear evidence, are you have that evidence there to show off that, this is a bigger problem than it should be. But then you also have it where it can be a huge security risk as well. You have these cameras, who knows what they're going to be recording, if they're going to be recording certain processes, shift changes, seeing how things are done to try to find holes in the system. You have that argument as well. So it becomes a very fine line when it comes to, well, we should have the right to be able to do this, but then again, it can compromise our security, and it's up to, well, people to interpret that and see how they like it, kind of, test both ways. My personal opinion, though, is that the TSA is a huge joke. I mean, sure, they may stop some stuff, but what they're looking for nowadays, the restrictions that they have nowadays, was used once and only once, and will never, ever, 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 ever be done again, because it's, an MO that they, won't use anymore. And it'll just, I feel like I just said a lot, because there's a huge gray area when it comes to the abilities for terrorists to use a repeatable method when trying to compromise security. But then again, that's a different story for a different time, so we'll just leave it at that. But what I won't leave at that is coffee. I love coffee. It wakes me up in the morning when I need my mid-afternoon boost. It's right there to help me. It's one of the better options out there than some other things that may give you more energy throughout the day. And one of the coolest things out there is the little Keurig machines. I think I'm saying that right. Keurig. I think it's a German word. It's basically one of those little pod things where you take a pod of a specific type of coffee, you put it in this machine, and it basically gives you a personal brew of coffee. That's great, and it's become a huge market, a big enough market where people are selling these refill packs that are outside of the manufacturers. They're refill packs that basically allow you to keep refilling an unlimited amount of times with a reusable cup. Well, apparently Keurig is now going to use DRM on their coffee makers. You heard that right. They're using DRM on a coffee maker for coffee. You're joking, right? Basically, they don't want you to use those reusable pods because they say that it takes away from them, because people can they're not buying these patented pods. And that's what they call them. They call them pods. And they're not they're not getting money from it. So they're jealous, basically. So they're going to start using DRM on the coffee maker. So be sure to get one of the older coffee makers. They're still great. There's nothing wrong with the older coffee makers, and you can get those refill packs and you'll be good to go. But just be aware that the upcoming, they haven't released anything yet, but the upcoming Keurig machines will start to have DRMing with their cups as well as the machines themselves. And if you try to use a reusable cup on them and it doesn't work, well, it's because DRM is taking its place, and it will probably open it up to people pirating some sort of way to make it happen. But speaking of pirating, because I love segues like that, would you like to transmit a FM signal? Well, you really couldn't until somebody figured out how to in a very small and compact way. You guys know Raspberry Pi, right? Not the food Raspberry Pi, but the little motherboard device is basically everything you want in a very small form factor. They figured out a way how to make that into an FM transmitter, allowing you to do things like share your music in a local area. I mean, this FM transmitter isn't very strong, so you won't be able to take over huge stations with their gigantic multi-million-dollar FM antennas. No, but you'll be able to take over your little small area, and you can use this to share music, to do something like that. They have a great script for it and a great guide for it on makezine.com. It's a nice, very nice way and process to get everything going very, very quickly. You don't have to do too much, rather than make sure that you have a compatible FM radio that can tune to the frequency that you're going to be transmitting at, so that you can, make it as well as you can. But it's very simple and straightforward. I would think that a novice could get this going in a little bit under maybe an hour or two, depending on the time that it takes to get everything. But let's move on to our next story, which is about clothing. It's very high-tech clothing. One of the things that we're probably all very scared of is being tased. If we ever, come around a police officer who might have a taser, you're like, oh, I don't want to get tased or shot or both. Well, that may change for some sneaky people, because somebody has figured out how to make taser-proof clothing. It is basically regular clothes, but it's lined with carbon fiber. The carbon fiber will just dissipate the electric shock, and it will basically allow you to not get tased if somebody were to try to taser you. And I would think this would be for one of those handheld tasers that you put in direct contact, not one of those shoot 'em, and it will pierce your skin. That will probably pierce right through the carbon fiber material. But it's pretty expensive. It's about $20 for a yard of this material. So depending on how large you are and you're making this clothing, it could cost you a pretty penny. But it does very well. There's some videos and pictures there to show a taser right up against the clothing, and it just doesn't affect the guy. Whether or not it's actually true or the guy can just really resist the taser is up to trying it yourself. But if you find yourself where you might be tasered, might think about getting some sort of clothing. And let's talk about our next story here. I'm kind of running fast through this. I've got a whole day planned ahead of me, and I'm making this podcast because I love it and I'm dedicated to it. But we'll get through these subjects. We'll try with a little bit of shorter podcast. Maybe we'll try a little bit with a longer podcast, but we'll just keep it nice and moving while I take a drink of water. Water. Okie dokie. Let's talk about Apple. They're not in the news because of patents. They're not in the news because they're suing or somebody's suing them. But they're in the news because of their security guidelines. Apple is notorious for having very locked down security, even on their devices. One of these is an iPad, where this story revolves around. This story basically entails a woman who died. She happened to own an iPad, but this iPad had a password on it, and it was locked. And now these two sons are trying to get their mother's iPad unlocked so they can possibly look at any sensitive information that may be left for them and be able to reclaim it for the family. Well, Apple is being a little bit of a stickler because they're saying that they can't just do it. They need to have the proper death certificates, forms. They're basically putting a lot of hoops in front of these guys. And this is another one of those stories where you can see two sides of the conversation, where Apple is trying to do the right thing, being very security conscious, not unlocking iPads just because somebody said, oh, this person died. Hi, I have an iPad. Can you unlock it for me? I mean, you get a lot of people. If you could just walk into an Apple store and say, hey, my mom died. Here's an iPad. Can you unlock it for me? That's not going to go over very well. And people can just walk in there and get an iPad unlocked. So, Apple is safeguarding themselves from potential backlash from that by wanting to get the correct paperwork, and submitting the correct paperwork, I think is one of those big key things. But then on the other hand, it's just an iPad. We have the death certificate. They showed Apple a death certificate, but apparently that wasn't enough for them. So they now have to jump through all these hoops, which adds to the burden after their mother died. So you have these two, things that you have to think about. There's a balance, once again, a balance between what should be right and what, has to happen. And I'm not necessarily saying each side is wrong. My personal opinion would be that I think Apple, is trying to do the right thing. They're trying to safeguard their members from, maliciously being used to unlock devices. So I don't think they're doing anything wrong there. Maybe there should be a better process in front of it, maybe. But I think that, Apple is kind of in the right in this one. I think people are making a bigger yell about it than maybe should be. Well, let's now move on. Talk about Linux. It's probably one of the most underappreciated operating systems out there, especially in the consumer market. Not a lot of stuff runs on it. Sometimes you gotta finagle it to work. But in recent years, and especially in the recent couple of months, we've really seen the rise in Linux and how it functions, and even more people supporting it. And so Linux is becoming a bigger part of our ecosystem. And with programs like Windows XP going away, those computers that run Windows XP may not be the fastest. So they may be trying to find a different option. And one of the best options out there that's free and the best available is kind of Linux. So the big question is, how do you get started with Linux? Because there's free guides online, there's places that you can go to look up Linux, but there's no concrete way. Well, I guess I should say there's no concrete way that's free. There is a $2,400 course that the Linux Foundation offers that will introduce you to Linux, but that's $2,400. That's a lot of money for somebody wanting to use a free software program. Well, that could change this summer, and that could change by the Linux Foundation offering up their Introduction to Linux course for free. That's right. The Linux Foundation this summer will be opening up their Introduction to Linux course for free. So anybody, newbie, maybe a little bit somebody more experienced, will be able to view this Introduction to Linux course and see how well it works. Now, that doesn't mean that the Linux Foundation is going to open up all of their courses, just the Introduction through Linux course. And it's an online training. Costs about $2,400 if you were to pay for it. And that being said, though, it seems that it's going to get a big boost. Maybe it could potentially give a huge boost to the Linux crowd and to everything that they're trying to do. Because I think, Linux is definitely one of those OSs, one of those operating systems to take a look at. It's not something to turn your back to. It's definitely one of the best things out there. And I'm not saying that because, I'm a Linux lover. I just know this because guess what? A lot of the websites you go to nowadays are running on Linux. Linux powers about, I want to say 80% of the entire internet. The entirety of the internet is powered by Linux. And the desktop versions are starting to make huge hits, especially with Ubuntu. One of the biggest ones out there, Ubuntu. And it's, picking up steam very, very fast. So I would very much encourage people to check it out and to, take a look and see what it can do for you. Just start off with a simple Ubuntu install, maybe on a virtual machine, maybe on a flash drive. Yeah, you can even load it up on a flash drive and use it just fine and see how well it works. Well, let's move on to a quite funny story. I found this story hilarious, and that is that the U.S. is suing Sprint for overcharging on wiretaps. We love the U.S. because they love to spy on us. One of the things they usually do is wiretaps, and when they do an order to wiretap on phones, especially through cellular carriers, they usually incur a charge. I mean, it's not going to be free. They're going to, charge you for it. Well, apparently the U.S. government's a little bit mad at them because they have this lawsuit now saying that they were overcharged for their wiretapping, dilemma. And it's just hilarious. They're basically saying, oh, you're charging us too much for something that we want to use to spy on people. What a surprise there. So basically saying that they were overcharged by $21 million from Sprint, which is basically 58% of an inflation over what they think they should have been charging. This happened between January 1st, 2007 and July 31st, 2010. So yeah, this is quite a funny case. And I would hope that the judge would rule in Sprint's favor just to kind of stick it to the government for, wiretapping people. And I realize that sometimes a wiretap may be the good thing, but I think it's a thing that, how do I put this? I think it's something that it's overused, especially in light of recent events. I'll just say that much. But we'll move on to our next story, which is about broadband. It seems like every week we talk about the internet. It's one of those main subjects that we all like to talk about because, well, it's something that we should talk about. And it's from the Washington Post saying it shouldn't take a merger for low-income Americans to get cheap broadband. And basically, it's complaining that the merger between Comcast and Time Warner shouldn't be something to bring low-income families internet. I am one of the firm and true believers that the internet should be a basic human right. The amount that we can share with people, the amount that we can learn with people is astronomical compared to going to a library, compared to learning out of a textbook, because we can take different sources, we can watch videos, look at pictures. You have all of this content right there on the internet, and enables us to learn more, to be more educated about the world. And I think that is something that everybody should have access to. But, with these big cable companies, they charge a pretty penny for being able to access even the most basic of internet. Now, in the past, Comcast has had a deal for, I believe, $10 a month on broadband, but they only offered it in select areas, and those select areas were pretty slim and far apart. But apparently Comcast was announcing recently that they're going to be expanding that after the merger between Time Warner and Comcast. And that's where this article takes a turn. It says that, well, why should Time Warner and Comcast now offer this if they're going to merge? Why weren't they offering this before? Why weren't they doing more to connect people? Well, simple answer there. Money. Isn't that everything? That's the answer to everything. Money. Because, of course, Comcast, Time Warner, they don't want to just give away internet for $10. They think they deserve more money. So they're going to charge $20, $50, $100 a month for internet. And they complain that they don't get enough money, even though they post record profits every year. What's up with that? So we'll see where this goes. I am not a huge fan of this merger. I don't think it should happen. I think it will give too much market power to Comcast if this deal goes through. And I think it's a wrong move. And I think somebody should be doing something to block it. And there's my personal and very honest opinion on that front. So be wary, people. Be very wary. Now let's talk about our last subject of this week, and that is, of course, Google, Facebook, and Yahoo. Oh, I'm sorry. Yahoo! Sorry, voice cracked. Anyways, Yahoo is saying something very interesting now. Apparently, they're going to stop offering sign-in services for Yahoo, meaning that you can now not use Facebook or your Google account to connect it to your Yahoo account. So be very wary about that. They're going to be rolling out these changes very soon. So make sure you have some sort of a local account on your Yahoo. I mean, who really uses Yahoo nowadays? I guess the only thing that I use Yahoo for now is Flickr, and that's slowly going away. I've actually started to be using 500 pixels more, 500px.com, I think it is. I use that much more than I use any other Yahoo service. So make sure that you have a Yahoo ID and you're not just using your sign-in for that. But there you go. That's our stories this week. I think that was 10, 11 stories. We just blew through that in 20 minutes. Let's talk about our sponsor this week. We always have a sponsor because we couldn't be producing this show without them. So listen up. Our sponsor this week is Audible. They're a great service. If you ever wanted to listen to audiobooks, this is the site that you want to go to. audiblepodcast.com/logic. I'll say that one more time if you didn't get to write it down. audiblepodcast.com/logic. That is the special URL to get a free audiobook of your choice. You can keep it. Doesn't matter if you cancel the service afterwards, you get to keep that audiobook, yours to keep forever and ever and ever. So go to audiblepodcast.com and, not Audible Podcast. Yes, audiblepodcast.com. I can't even keep my mind straight. audiblepodcast.com/logic. That'll get you your free audiobook. Right now, I'm actually re-listening to the Steve Jobs documentary. I'm actually writing a paper on it, and I was re-listening to it, writing down quotes. And, rather than reading a book and writing down notes, you kind of have to go back and forth, and then pick back up with your book. Whereas if you are listening to it, you hear these quotes, you can write them down, you can, back up and replay them. Because I don't know about you guys, whenever I read a book, I have this voice in my head that reads the book for me. And if I have to stop and restart, I kind of have to get that voice going again. And it can take a couple paragraphs to kind of get in the flow. Whereas if you're listening to an audiobook, you have that same flow. You can rewind and keep playing it, and you still have that same flow of your mind. So keep that in mind next time you are maybe wanting to listen to an audiobook while doing homework or just doing a long trip. I'm going to be taking a 6-hour plane ride here in another week. So I'm going to be looking up for another podcast, or not podcast, I'm going to be looking up for another audiobook to listen to. So thank you guys so much for listening to me. We will be back in 2 weeks with another podcast. So be sure to like and share this with your friends, leave us comments, all that fun stuff. We will see you guys in our next podcast.